YouTube? On this episode of Build a Kingdom, we're going to take this transmission apart, weld up the differential, bolt it to that motor with a new flywheel and clutch, and hopefully get it back into the car. I'm not going to go over every single step of welding up the differential in this transmission because there's an entire video on my page for that, welding up an F23 transmission differential. It goes step by step. There's even a little short on how to build the tool to hold the input shaft while you're taking it apart. So we're not going over that. It'll be a time lapse of me blowing that thing apart and getting oil everywhere and making a mess. Welding, put it all back together, time lapse. I just got done pumping these motor mounts full of windshield urethane, filling in all the gaps, basically turn that into a solid motor mount. This is what I use. Doesn't really matter what you use, windshield urethane. And one tube is enough to do all 4 mounts. I guess we just need to get to work. Let's go! Well, somehow, after digging through all of my crap, I only have 2 flywheel bolts. Not sure how that happened. I can't find the rest of the new flywheel bolts. So I guess I'm gonna have to order some more. So this is not going in today. So I don't know. Maybe I'll mount. I'm gonna drop the cradle out of here, get some of these mounts put on where they're supposed to be, and I'll keep moving forward on some other stuff we got going on here, but we are stuck right here until I get flywheel bolts. Dang it. All right, my flywheel bolts came in from ZZP, so we've got those in. I need to look up the torque spec for that because right now we just got a couple lug-a-duggas on the little impact on there. So I got to check that, but we also got, today came in new fuel line. At the end of the last video, we noticed that the fuel line needed to be replaced. So we ordered a brand new line on eBay. As you can see, it's pre-bent. It's normally the metal comes up quite a bit higher, comes up to like here, and then there's a braided piece on it. It's actually it's actually laying on the floor right here. Looks like that. This one was pieced together at the back, and this car is pretty much all brand new, so I didn't want to do that. So we ordered a new line. It's pretty nice. Nice setup here. Got a little bit longer whip on it than the other one, which is fine. We'll get this tucked up out of the way. And it's pretty nice. The way they shipped it, they had to like roll it into a loop and get it in that big box back there. So I had to twist it a little bit, turn it, and it's a little fun getting it in, but you know, for the most part, it goes right back in the stock location. It's all bent, pre-bent, follows the same route, except for there's not a piece of rubber hose here like there was before. We got a solid line all the way back. And up in there, over to here, brand new fuel filter. We got all the lines hooked back up. So, Inline Tube is the name of the company it came from. I ordered it on eBay. I don't know. Maybe it came from Inline Tube. Maybe that was their eBay page I got it from. It's possible. I've actually used stuff from them in the past. My brake lines on the 79 Camaro, I believe, were from Inline Tube. So, pretty good stuff. I've never had a problem with it. Looks nice, clean. So that's in. Brand new fuel line, front to back. We got our flywheel bolts in. I got to look up the torque spec for those, get those spec'd in, and then we can put the transmission on the motor and put all this in the cradle. That's what I was trying to say. All right, so that's the next step. Get all that stuff together. All right, at this point, the flywheel's on. The clutch is assembled. Luckily, my teammate Curtis Rung stopped by and dropped off some pressure plate bolts because apparently I didn't have those either. I dug through all my bolt bins, and when you do stuff like I do, you have bolt bins everywhere. It's like 6 of them I had to empty out and still didn't have any. But he did. So he ran over and dropped off some pressure plate bolts. Thank you, Curtis. And this is together. So now we can mate up this transmission to this motor. And I will admit this is one of my least favorite things to do because manhandling this heavy thing onto there can be a pain in the butt. Getting the spline lined up, everything to slide together properly. And you really gotta make sure everything lines up. This should slide right up tight against the block. You shouldn't have to pull this in or knock it off the cart. You shouldn't have to like force this in with the bolts. I mean, you can get bolts in it while you're doing it when you're fighting it to kind of hold it while you wiggle it and get it, but it should just kind of slide right together easily. Should. We're gonna time lapse it because I don't know, maybe I'll have more luck if it's time lapse. If I try to just do it on video, it'll probably take twice as long and the video will be longer of you just watching me struggle, which may be entertaining for you, but I'll probably have some choice words that aren't appropriate. So we're gonna time lapse it and hope that that gives me a little bit of luck I need for this thing to just bloop, right together. All right, let's try. See, told you I was going to struggle. So I guess telling you not to pull the gap together maybe wasn't quite the right wording for it because technically when you get it right up tight close, it's at the locating pins and you can't really force it onto the locating pins. So you do got to pull it closed, but you should be able to slide it all the way till it's like hitting the locating pins and the pins are kind of holding it. And then you kind of got to help it a little bit onto the locating pins, but yeah, that's it. The bottom of the transmission, the mount for the front is actually lower than the oil pan. That's why I had to put the cherry picker on there and kind of just lift the engine a little bit to get it to mate up. But it's on there, it's together. There's 2 more bolts that go in the bottom, but when we pick it up with the cherry picker, I can get to them. It's a lot easier to get them in once I get it up off the cart. There's more swing room for that ratchet. So, all right, now this has to go in that cradle. And that cradle's got to go up in there. But before I do that, I'm going to drill out the 3 bolts on the flange of this header because these eBay headers, the hardware that comes with them is absolute garbage. It will not stay tight on the racetrack. So I drill these 3 flange bolt holes out and put hardware straight through. 3/8 hardware, just right straight through. So we'll drill that first. But then this is going in that cradle. Yeah. Motor, meat cradle. This is in. This is ready to go in the car. I have to make sure I have everything done up there in that engine bay before I put this thing in there. So there's an ABS block that's got to come out. We don't use the ABS block. We put the manual block in for the brakes. I gotta get that thing out of the way and figure out how to control the brake fluid so I don't want it messing up all my paint. And then I gotta slide the 5-speed shifter cables through the firewall and into the engine bay before I can actually put this in. Well, I could do it with it in, but it's a hell of a lot easier to do without this in. So I'm kind of just gonna roll this back out of the way, lower this car down, get that brake ABS unit thing out of the way, and get the shifter cables pulled through. And then this can go in there for the final time. Well, the first and final time, because this motor and transmission has technically never been in that shell. This engine came out of a Saturn Aura. That transmission came out of a XFE Cobalt 363 transmission and a 2.4 out of a Saturn Aura. The Cobalt came with a 2.4. It's exactly the same motor. There's nothing different about it. It just happened to have come out of a Saturn Aura. So, all right. Couple quick things. In we go. You watched me search my entire shop in that time lapse to find one bolt for that motor mount on the front over there. That was a good time. Back and forth, looking all over the place. I literally had like 4 of them in my hand the other day, but you think I could find one now? Whew. All right, so I jumped ahead a little bit here. Shifter cables are in. You can see they're coming down through there. I got them hung up out of the way here. Same thing, fuel line, I pulled that up over the brake booster, kind of out of the way because we got to lift that motor up into here. And then I took the ABS block out and I put the manual block in. You can see I used the same lines. I just took my time and fed them around the lines that were here and into this manual block. This manual block already had the lines in it for the master cylinder. So that part was easy. I didn't have to take those out of the ABS block. Those were already gone. My father had already taken those out. So when you do a 5-speed swap on one of these cars, you're basically going to replace this whole black plate. Okay. So you take the dash and stuff out of the inside. You got to take the heater box out. And then you take all these bolts out. And this whole plate with the pedals and everything comes out the back. So we had to 5-speed swap this car. So this stuff all came out of the other car, out of a 5-speed car. And when my father did it, he had all this stuff unbolted. I normally leave it all hooked up. He took it all off, but we put all of it back together. I had a manual block in my stash of parts. I already had those lines on it, so I put that in here, and I took all the lines out of the ABS block, which is laying on the floor over there next to that bag of rags. I took these lines and kind of just, smooth bends, no kinks, curved them around, twisted them, and got them all in this manual block. So because I have the lines to the master cylinder from the original manual block, this is actually in the right spot. So the bracket, I had to paint it. It was all rusty. When I put the bracket back on here, it should just bolt right back up to the frame rail and be good, be up out of the way. So everything's out of the way. Got some smooth here. I end up taking the control arms off. You saw them before hanging off of here, but I wanted them out of the way. So control arms are off, out of the way. This will have to get moved a little bit when we go to put the cradle in, but that's it. Now we're going to put that cradle and that engine in this car. Well, it's in there. And I know somebody's going to ask the question, so we're going to address it right now. My jack. That is a motorcycle jack that, as you can see, has been modified. It's got a little riser on it, a couple cross beams going across it. And then this piece has a bolt through it with a stud. That stud is just a locating pin that goes in the hole of this right here in the cradle. This was specifically made for these cradles. You can't buy it. We customized the motorcycle jack to fit in the cradle and hold the cradle and the motor and everything. And this is an absolute lifesaver. This was the best. This might be the best invention my father ever came up with. I didn't do this. I wish I could take credit for it, but I didn't. This was all him. He figured it out after dropping a few of these. Being that I race a Cobalt, the motor's coming in and out. Stuff happens. Sometimes they break and you got to put new ones in. Whatever. You're doing motor stuff. The thing's got to come in and out. So he came up with this idea. He did the math. He figured it out. He built this thing, and this is awesome. This is like the greatest thing ever, as you can see. You still struggle in and out a little bit, but part of that struggle I just had was because I brain farted on the rack. The rack has to go, as you can see, through, if it'll focus, through underneath that mount. So between the cradle and that mount. and I didn't even think of that. I tried to leave the rack hanging from the spindles, and no, can't do that. So I had to pull it out quick and slide it through that hole and put it back on the cradle in order to make that work. So that's what you saw me doing when I dropped the rack out of it. I had to fix my brain fart, but we got that in there. My sweet jack. And now the motor's in the car. Look at that. It's like a jewel in a jewelry box. And now we gotta hook everything up. We gotta put this motor mount in over here. We gotta hook that motor mount, transmission mount, whatever you wanna call it over there. And we can start hooking some stuff up here. We get the radiator in here. Yeah, I'm gonna keep moving along here. I still gotta fabricate exhaust too. I don't know if we'll do that in this episode, but I'm gonna just start hooking some stuff up, get everything bolted in here. Let's go. All right, I decided to change course a little bit. This thing came in that I got from eBay for removing decals and stuff. Dude, I've never bought one of these before. This thing works great. This double back tape from like the side bumper door guard things that were on this car from the factory. Watch this shit. Slick is that? That is so much nicer than having to like spray solvent on there and scrape it with your fingernail. Those things work great. I should have bought one of those a long time ago. Anyways, we got a bunch of stuff bolted up inside the car. We're moving along here. I'll catch you up here in a second. All right, so this is where we're at. Radiator's in, fans in there. We got vacuum lines, radiator hoses, the coolant reservoir with the hoses on that, fuel line. Got most of the stuff hooked up in here. Had to make a run and grab a bunch of hose clamps. Didn't have enough hose clamps. So, you know, I got that brake manual block I talked about before. That's hooked up to the chassis there. Tucked out of the way. Everything looks good and clean. I got to do a little work on the air intake here. Get that in, but it's pretty much it for the engine bay until we get the wiring harness. My teammate Andy Shoemaker's working on the harness. We'll get that in here. Fuse box and everything goes up inside the old windshield wiper motor tray up there. Gets tucked up in there out of the way. So until that gets here, we're pretty much done in the engine bay, short of putting some hood pins in for this hood. So looking good, looking good. Another thing I had to do that I actually forgot about was the backs of the wheel wells. Kind of like you saw me cut this fender out for tire clearance. You gotta smash this all back in for tire clearance as well. Cut it underneath, if you can see that. You kind of cut across it. There's two holes there from the factory. Cut across it, tuck the metal up in, and then hammer it back. Yeah, not the prettiest thing in the world, but it works. That's how you get your tire clearance, so that you can put a giant tire in here and have it not rub when you're counter steering. But yeah, and then this, this isn't black because I think it looks good. This is actually bed liner. Rattle can spray on bed liner. Here, I'll show you the can. This stuff. Back in the day, I painted an entire truck with this stuff. And what I found was that nothing sticks to it. You literally just take a hose and you could rinse the truck right off. Just rinse the mud right off and the truck looked like you just got done spraying it. So on the last car I built, I used this on the inner fenders and the entire underside of the car. And the guy that I built the car for said it works exactly how I intended it to work. Take the hose, sprays the mud right off. So it's a little trick for you dirt track guys that are building these things. That rattle can spray on bed liner, truck bed coating. Nothing sticks to it. So yeah, you can spray your inner fenders, bottom of your car, and the mud just rinses right off. It works fantastic. Little trick for you. This is going to be it for this episode. On the next episode, we will cover fabricating the exhaust and putting the fuel tank skid plate on. That'll be a good time. And maybe we'll touch in on some paint for this thing. Or maybe the paint and graphics will be an entire episode on its own. I don't know. Y'all know how much I love vehicle presentation. So there she is, looking pretty. And until the next episode, keep it creative and happy building.